$2.4 billion IT portfolio in over 300 locations around the world. Ken has also held key government positions at the Department of Homeland Security, the Commerce Department, and the Ex-Im Bank. Mr. Rogers has his degrees from Virginia Tech, George Washington University, and the University of Maryland. Thank you, sir, very much for giving us your time. I'm glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. So going at the end, you get to summarize what you've already heard, right? So there was a guy in a hot air balloon, and he lost his direction. Saw a car sitting by the side of the road, and he lowered the hot air balloon and asked the guy in the car, "Hey, do you by any chance know where I am?" And the guy in the hot air balloon said, "Well, of course, you're in a hot air balloon by the side of the road, about 300 feet off the ground, or 30 feet off the ground." So the guy in the hot air balloon said, "Wow, you must be a government contractor." Well, that's funny. I am. How did you know that? Well, what you told me was true and accurate, but of no useful value whatsoever. And so then, in retort back, the guy in the car said, "You must be a government IT leader." "Hey, well, that's kind of funny because I am. How did you know that?" "Well, you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and somehow it's my fault." So it was interesting listening to all of the private sector folks that are in the room today talking. I'm living this IT reform effort in the federal government, and it is extremely challenging. But I think we do know where we're going, and we're aggressively looking at how we can do IT differently. And it is one of the titles that I go by is Chief Cheese Mover. Because when it really comes to IT modernization, it is all about changing the structure, the process, the organization. It is all about change. In fact, I would argue that any IT innovation is really about creating a better organization. You heard about the size and scope of our budget. One of the new things that happened in FY17 is they brought IT acquisition review under the CIO. Maybe it was because of FITARA, maybe not. But the kinds of insight that we got by looking at IT acquisitions and aligning those acquisitions to our IT investments has been significant. And I'll talk about more of that later. What I would like to do is just lay out at a 2,000-foot level what our current IT strategic plan is, what we're focusing on, and then I would like to talk about a couple trends that represent our challenges. So in terms of our strategic plan, IT modernization is at the forefront, and that is a lot of what you heard today. How do we create a cloud ecosystem that has been optimized? We are no longer cloud first. We have to get to the point where we are optimizing our ecosystem in the cloud and leveraging the benefits of it. In terms of getting cost benefit from moving to the cloud, we have to understand the acquisition environment, and we have to move into the cloud with the right structured acquisitions, with the right IT acquisition cadre within government, inherently governmental, and we need to iterate that. We're just finishing a large contract, infrastructure contract or integrator contract, 10 years, $2 billion. Those days are over where you have a fixed price contract for 10 years doing a set thing. So how are we going to do this going forward? In 2000, earlier this year, we launched a cloud strategy for the Department of State, laying out what that ecosystem looks like. It's multi-platform, and it's leveraging shared services. We had a cloud-first strategy, and we went from about 10 cloud solutions in 2010 to over 200 today. Not integrated, separate production environments, all managed and with increased decentralization of IT. That's not optimized cloud, that's not smart cloud. And we have to get to the point where we have a shared service. And really the beauty of a shared service set of cloud opportunities for our customers is our customers get to move up the stack, focus on the SaaS layer, leverage their money, more effectively to build out capabilities that meet their business needs. And so that's kind of at the forefront of our modernization. The heavy lift, well, that's an organizational change lift, because now we're better insight and visibility into the IT spend and activity in the cloud. That second tier then is to start moving our legacies. Not lift and shift of old legacy systems, but moving those systems in an effective way to get a value proposition in the cloud. Again, a big piece of that modernization effort is the user experience, and how do we get obsessed with the user or the customer, as AWS had mentioned earlier. And then third, we talk about agile IT, DevOps, and so forth. One of the biggest challenges we have in the federal government that I'm trying to crack is agile planning and agile governance. Today, I can put a solution in place. I did it earlier this month in a week. It takes me 90 to 120 days to actually go through the governance, the project planning, the requirements, the architecture. I could go on and on and on. And if we don't put in place agile planning, so we can work close with the customer, we're going to fail to really get the benefits from our modernization effort. So this strategy that we have is bookended by leveraging data as a strategic asset and the IT workforce of the future. Perfectly lined up, of course, with the President's management agenda. So on the data piece, the migration, the modernization of our environment into a cloud ecosystem creates a fundamental, significant opportunity to attend to our data. At the Department of State, our data, we have a single financial system, we have a single HR system, a single logistics system, but they're not integrated, they're stovepiped, and they all own the data. So how do we leverage this opportunity of migration to attend to the data, normalize it, make it accessible through credentials and rules, so make sure that we have the right security around it as we host it in different environments. So that's critical to our strategy over the next 4 years. And the IT workforce of the future is probably one of the most complex ones. We have, at Department of State, we have about a third of our workforce civil service, a third of our workforce foreign service, we have foreign national, and about a third of our workforce foreign nationals in the various countries where we have our embassies and consulates. And then, of course, on the IT side, about 40% of our IT workers are federal, and 60% of our IT workforce is contractor. So as we move up the stack, I tell a story of my daughter. She's a senior in college. She's studying computer science, and she had a job with a company in the financial sector where she managed AWS infrastructure service for this global company. She was one of 2 interns on an 8-person team to manage their whole global infrastructure. I can guarantee you I have more than 8 people managing my global infrastructure around the world. And this is just a small example of the kind of change that we're looking at going forward. So one of those is just looking at that contract workforce. We were putting a solution in place, we were putting it into the cloud, a ServiceNow solution, and the ops team came over to my project lead on the business side, and she said, well, you're doing ops work. And I said, no, I'm not. I did an acquisition task on an enterprise licensing agreement with ServiceNow, and they did the ops. So have we really fully grasped the fact that by the end of next year, 50% of my on-prem data centers are empty? I'll still have high-value assets there, but they will be empty, and the 200 contract workforce that are supporting that, we no longer need, and there's been a shift of that investment from one side of the organization to the other. Focusing on customer anywhere, anytime access. So one of the challenges we have with cloud is I'm now taking data off-prem in 300 locations around the globe. So I've shifted my problem from having on-prem data at rest that I have to secure and all that, to a connectivity problem. we own the last mile in many of the places where we operate overseas, and getting at that data that is now in the cloud creates a connectivity issue that we have to address, and looking at the monitoring requirements, the trusted internet connection, and how that is optimized going forward is going to be critical for our success. So I have a few more minutes, I think. So that data analytics, risk-based, we talked about security. So part of our modernization effort, is to look at cybersecurity from a risk. How do we get to yes with our customers securely? And how do we not over-secure what doesn't need to be controlled with SBU, whatever level, but make sure we've got our high-value assets controlled with the right controls. When we went from one email system to 15 O365 tenants that all need to be secured. So that's, in terms of my cybersecurity costs, that's unnecessarily duplication. I have to secure each of those environments. I need to assess the controls. So how do we bring that together and lower our costs and move that forward? And I just mentioned to you in terms of the workforce. What is inherently governmental, and how do we get, in terms of the workforce, and how do we recruit, train, and retain those types of workers that have a high degree of technical expertise, but also understand the business, the SLA side of that equation, and we can bring that together to move us into the fourth, the fourth era of transformation. So on the business side of things, what we are working hard to do is increase IT transparency. What do we have, and how are we managing that? Improve our services to our mission services, improve the data for decision making, and demand accurate cost. I have a good idea of what's budgeted for IT, but have very little visibility into the spend of IT. And the way the private sector, I was meeting with the CIO from Disney earlier this week, they know the cost of their IT, and they make priority decisions based on how they can squeeze operating costs and how they can increase revenue. And those two drivers are primary drivers for how they make decisions with the investments that they make. We don't have the luxury of those two very shareholder-driven values to really make that happen. But with accurate cost data, there is a significant amount of savings that can be achieved across the federal government and roll into modernization, leveraging those portfolios in an effective way. Okay, 4 trends. Shared services, we've talked about that a lot. I'm not going to go into that. Second one is IT is mission critical. For my life, for the last 25 years doing IT, it's always been looked at as support function. But when I was the faculty chair over at National Defense University, I would take my students off to talk with CIOs in industry. And you find CIOs at places like Cap One who say, well, we're a digital company that does banking. Or you go to the CIO at Starbucks and they say, well, we're a digital company that does coffee. And the reality is, it is becoming impossible to separate the critical dependence our mission has on IT, and we can no longer look at it as a cost center or a support function because of that integration. I've also mentioned the talent shift, and we need to attend to that. And the last point I'm going to make is what I refer to, and I look at this very closely across the federal government. It's called the IT demand gap. There is a voracious appetite for more data, for more storage, for more compute power that is outpacing our budgets in the federal government. So one of the biggest drivers in my mind for IT modernization is to understand the only way we're going to narrow that gap between the demand of our customers is to start squeezing the operating cost of our budgets across the federal government, and that's what we're doing at State Department. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, Ken.